All right, well, we are ready for lesson 7, and we're in chapter 7. I got ahead of us last week and had sent you out a lot of background material. I'm glad I did since we could talk about it last week and get prepared. But this week with Daniel, chapter 7, we're getting into the apocalyptic, is what it's called. It's from the Greek word apocalypsis, which means to uncover something or to reveal it, which is where the book title Revelation comes from the last book, because it's also called Apocalypse. I know that we think Apocalypse is a genre of movie with the end of the world has happened and it's just Mad Max or some type of terrible situation, but that's a modern hijacking of the word. The word is from apo, Greek preposition, and then um, kalypsis, so apocalypsis, uncovering of something. And I probably butchered one or two of those words trying to pronounce it, but you get the main point. With Daniel chapter 7, we are also back in Hebrew. Remember, I told you that Daniel, um, it has some Aramaic and it has some Hebrew. We're getting back to the Hebrew section of Daniel. Chapter 1 was in Hebrew, and now it starts back in Hebrew in chapter 7. Of course, this is verse 1 starts in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Um, we talked last week about this vision, the four beasts. And, Daniel has retired. As we said, he is semi-retired from public life, from what we can tell. Belshazzar did not see fit to use him in his administration as thoroughly as Nebuchadnezzar had done. There had been some infighting in the Babylonian administration. As I told you, Belshazzar probably got the throne from his father, Nabonidus, after assassinating possibly the previous king. This leaves him wanting to keep the previous king's administration way out of reach from him. Also, if you remember, the previous king had also assassinated the person before him. So it's been a terrible struggle for the past decade or so in the Babylonian administration. And Daniel has checked out instead of drawing his pension, as it were. So let's talk about his dream. And I know we briefly talked about it last week, but for anyone who missed it, verse 2, Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. That's the Mediterranean. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. Remember, we said that seemed very difficult to imagine a beast that happening to them until we remember the story of Nebuchadnezzar roaming as a beast and being given a heart of a man back. And behold, verse 5, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So let's pause and talk about this first section, the vision of the four beasts. What do y'all see going on here? And I hope everybody has a study sheet, right? I sent out about 3 o'clock, or maybe a little bit before that, lesson 7 study sheet.
So you want to know who the beasts were?
Well, we can start talking about that now if you want to discuss it. I know that there are many interpretations, and we're quite willing to discuss it as a group and go through them. So if you want to bring it up, let's start.
Well, the first was clearly Babylon.
What clues do you think?
Huh?
What clues do you think give that away?
Well, they came in and they powered over everybody. They were just taking over the world.
Wasn't the lion that had the wings on it wasn't outside the gates of Babylon?
Yes, and
on that Ishtar gate, I think you showed us.
You saw a lot of lion imagery on the Ishtar gate. But also, I mean, we remember this from Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the giant image of 4 parts. He was the head of gold. I mean, so yeah, I think Jim, that's a safe interpretation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to be safe.
What else do y'all see about this section? Or
about the first beast?
Babylon.
You talking about the first beast?
Yeah, or we can move on. But the first beast, we're still fine talking about that. What happened to the beast?
Well, they broke the wings off of it and made it stand up like a man and gave it. That would indicate the same thing they did to Nebuchadnezzar, right?
Yeah. I think that's another giveaway.
Yeah.
What about the second beast, the bear?
The Mede Persian, they think that it was probably because the 2 of them were grappling for power, and one would be strong, and then the other one would come to power, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was wondering what are the 3 ribs he's holding on to?
That's interesting that you would look at the 3 ribs.
I taught this many years ago. I still haven't figured it out.
Yeah, there are some theories, and some of them try to make a parallel between perhaps 3 empires that the Medo-Persians kind of dominated. I think it's just an image of it's like this. The Babylonians were builders. I remember from like the second lesson, they did not brag about their military prowess. But the Medo-Persians were a little different. They did talk about how powerful they were. They, as you know from history, they went into Asia Minor, the Greek city-states that were on the western side of or eastern side of the Aegean. They took all those out. They crossed the Bosphorus. They invaded Greece.
Oh, okay.
So those ribs, instead of being specific kingdoms, might just show this bear came for lunch, and he came to devour kingdoms.
Okay.
What do you think it means that one side was raised up?
The big kingdoms back then were, as we discussed at one time or another, were Assyria, Babylon, and Persia. And then also Assyria, Babylon. I can't figure out what the third kingdom is.
It was still Egypt. Egypt was still regional power.
So that would be like the 3 ribs.
And Babylon had, how many times they defeated Egypt? Twice? Or
Babylon had defeated Egypt when they came up to help Assyria. Then they actually, after they leveled Judah, marched into Egypt and exacted tribute from them.
That's so twice. Okay.
But it's pretty obvious that this bear represents the Medes and the Persians, and one side is higher up than the other in honor and power. And the Medes were always, a confederation of people that helped the Persians, but the culture and the leadership of the empire was Persian. Persia was dominant in that empire. Now,
The commentary that I have says that regarding the bear, that unlike the grace of the lion that was so swift, he was ponderous, and one side was higher than the other, suggests that Persia rose later than Media, how you pronounce it. But Persia soon overshadowed them in the kingdom. And they say that the 3 ribs in the bear's mouth may represent Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon.
Yeah.
Or could be Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt.
Yeah.
And the bear was told to devour flesh, told by God. And so the command suggests that the kingdoms operate by divine appointment.
Right.
And that they were actually carrying out God's purpose.
Yeah, Lydia is referencing the Eastern Greek colonies on Asia Minor. Greece proper would be across the Aegean on the western side. And if you remember your history,
Is that on our map?
let me see if it is. No, the map stops when it gets to the northern part of Syria. But if you'll remember, back to your history, the Persians met some initial success in Greece, but eventually got stopped at Thermopylae and then Marathon. So a lot of history gets kind of covered up in a couple of lines here. But yeah, the bear did have a divine command, and if you remember, Isaiah foretold Cyrus. He
46, and I can't remember the other ones.
Yeah, there was some foretelling, and also, if you look at Ezra and Nehemiah, God seems to direct the Persian kings quite a bit in what they're to do. Have Judah rebuild a temple, things like that. So the bear was obviously under his control. Anything else y'all see in the second beast? All right, third beast, a leopard.
Leopard?
Alexander the Great.
Yeah, that's what I think. So.
Yeah, quite an obvious, I would say, analogy for how quick and swift he was. And 4 wings of a bird on its back, 4 heads. Why the 4 heads?
Well, one of them is probably Alexander. One of them is probably his father. I think his name was Philip.
Philip of Macedon.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the other 2.
Well, I read that they were 2 of his major generals.
Well,
Yeah,
if y'all
Alexander's major general.
if y'all read the history, Alexander, in about 10 years, went all the way to the Indus River Valley. He destroyed the Persian Empire. They go back and research why was Alexander so successful, and some of the things they come up with for why he was so successful, they're really fun to look into, because it's one of those things where historians, if they're going to write history, have to find something different than anyone else. So I've seen a lot of ink spilled on what made Alexander so dominant on the battlefield. I have read that his spears were 2 foot longer than the enemy spears. His
Yeah.
spears were 14 foot. Most enemy infantry in Greece used 12-foot long spears, and that explains his success in Greece. I also have read that he figured out that since most people were right-handed, if he attacked at an angle from the left side, he could get in between their shields better because of the way they interlocked shields when they would fight phalanx versus phalanx, which is their infantry formation. And people have said, well, he realized that attacking at about a 33-degree angle would give him an advantage. So 2 foot longer spear, 33-degree angle. You know, you go to this and you say, at the end of the day, the man was fierce. He believed he could not be beaten. And
Yeah.
he would never shy away from a battle, even when he was hopelessly outnumbered. You know, he won because he was just the best general on the field often. But we also have to step back and say, providentially speaking, he won because God had determined his empire would rise and the Persians would fall. So after 10 years, he becomes ill and dies, probably poisoned. A lot of historians think he was poisoned. But his kingdom, his empire, splits into 4 pieces. There's a part up in Greece. There's a part down in Egypt. There's a part in the Middle East, and there's a part over in Persia. And it stays in 4 kingdoms the whole time. And if you look at where we're going in the coming chapters, it's very obvious that Alexander and his, kingdom divided into 4 are in view here. That empire, when viewed as a leopard with 4 heads, you got to think that for hundreds of years, this empire keeps its power divided into 4. It was only one leopard or one-headed leopard for 10 years. And so the identity of this kingdom, being a 4-headed leopard, is very apt because the culture was Greek, the administration was Greek. Greek language spread all over the Middle East. It replaced Aramaic because of this empire. And so when we look at what it accomplished, the imagery for this is very appropriate. Now, Jewish commentators differ. They believe the bear was Media and the leopard is Persia because they want the 4th beast to be the Greek kingdoms. But
Okay.
most Jewish believe that. Some Jewish people at the time, though, that Jesus was alive, did not believe that. It hasn't been 100%. Many people believe the 3rd beast was Greek back in that time. So now let's get to the 4th beast.
It's got to be Rome.
Yeah, Rome.
And it's different than the other beast, more terrifying.
Mhm.
What was different about Rome than the other empires, do you think?
The rule was imperialistic.
Yeah, you get the first, I use the word modern, it doesn't, not modern how we would use it, but the first modern advanced national state in the Roman Empire. It's different. And it lasts 1,000 years in some form or another. And even today, if you look at our architecture on our Capitol buildings, our architecture on our national monuments, and even a good amount of architecture in Europe, Rome has influenced us artistically. Rome has influenced us ideologically. We're still living in the shadow of the Roman Empire because it has made such a lasting impression. It's almost like this. The Chinese look back at the Han Dynasty about the same time the Roman Empire started, and that was the stamp for the Chinese national ethnic empire. Rome is a very similar thing in the European mindset. Even though we're more fragmented than the Chinese identity, the European Western mindset looks back to Rome, and that is the stamp that every other state that's come up has compared itself against. Even the Nazis were the Third Reich. They believed they were the Third Rome. So it was a dreadful beast, and it was different than the ones before it. Exceedingly strong. Iron teeth, which if you remember in the vision of Nebuchadnezzar, the statue had iron hips and then iron thighs and then iron feet mixed with clay. So that's very similar to the fourth kingdom from chapter 2. Anything else you can see about the fourth beast?
Well, Josh, in my studies, it's been a long time ago, was a comment someone made that one of the reasons the Roman military was so successful is that it copied Alexander's military system. Not only did you point out the spears, but the shields were metal and not woven material as many of the other armies are. So the armies they're fighting could not stick their swords through their shields. They were metal. Whereas they could put their spears and their swords through the other guy's shield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much ink has been spilled on the Roman military, and I'll tell you my opinion from reading about it is the Roman military was so good compared to everyone else because at whatever point their enemy would gamble on, we're going to win because of this, the Romans would figure out a way to work around it. And it could be as simple as, okay, like at Cannae, an entire Roman army got wiped out, 60,000 men.
Right.
They just built another one. Then at another point in time, Hannibal realized he could use elephants to run over their infantry formations. So they got a bunch of stuff together to start frightening the elephants. They found ways to blow smoke at the elephants or shoot darts at their eyes. They were so adaptable. They used shorter spears than Alexander, but they would throw their spears instead of go and stab. And whenever they got close, they would use a short sword, the gladius, just to stab. At any point when you think, okay, we can beat the Romans, and you try to find a way to beat them, they overcome and adapt, or adapt and overcome. Assess, adapt, overcome. They did that in every war to the point where if you try to use the things that beat them last time, it wouldn't beat them anymore. And if they relied on their strengths from last time and ended up losing, they'd change everything. They just were, until you get to the point where they rely on mercenary armies and barbarian armies that turn on them in the latter phases of the Roman Empire, they're unbeatable. And
they had a pretty neat defensive mechanism too, where they would, they made their shields so that they came to about where his nose was and down to their ankle. And they would stand there with their shields together, and the guys on the outside would have theirs to the side, and then the guys in the middle would have theirs over them. They called it a testudo, which means turtle.
Yeah, the turtle.
And the arrows and the spears, like you were saying, could not get through that testudo. And they were kind of like, it was their version of the tank.
Yeah.
But with men on foot.
Yeah, when they would stay there and wait till they estimated the other bad guys would shot all their arrows and throw all their spears. Open, go get them.
Yeah. They had excellent infantry, excellent cavalry, excellent siege engineers. If you just look at the totality of their infantry, you had these short, stocky Italian guys who were pretty tough in battle. But then you had the logistics system, the roads. And the Romans, when they'd build roads, they wouldn't look at a big hill and say, let's go around it. They would just go straight up and straight down. It's this mentality behind life where they said, if there's an obstacle, we confront it. and it undergirded everything they did. They would retire veterans and put them on fortress cities at the border of their empire. This automatic defense. I mean, they were smart from top to bottom. It was a unified system of warfare and empire that, really has not been repeated very much. And then small stuff like, who here likes salami? I love salami. Well, salami was one of the things the Romans invented so their armies could march on the move with dehydrated, long, skinny sausages that they could just hang up and go and would last for months. It's almost like they looked at warfare and tried to think of every way to get a competitive advantage, from the swords to the salami. And they just never quit improvising new ways to win. So, we could spend the rest of the time completely talking about this.
Rome's.
I got a question.
Yeah, Jerry?
What I don't understand the references to, it talks about it had 10 horns. It was considering those horns, and there was another horn and a little one coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots, and there in this horn were eyes like a man. I don't get the reference or what that's to.
Yeah, that's we're getting into horns are often seen as a sign of power or strength, and a lot of commentaries believe the horns are specific kings of this empire.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the emperors of Rome or something.
Right, and if you remember, I'm trying to double check here from something in Revelation. Let me see here. So in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea. Very similar imagery to Daniel, right? A beast out of the sea.
Mm-hmm.
With 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems or crowns on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads.
Rome, you got room.
And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's. And to it the dragon gave his power and his great authority. So you've got this similar imagery, not exactly, but similar imagery, talking about the first beast, and then later in the chapter there's a second beast that has 2 horns, and then that just continues throughout Revelation, this imagery that's very similar to Daniel. Now, I'm not going to interpret Revelation tonight because you're opening up a whole new can of worms, but a lot of commentators will take the 10 Roman emperors who started from the first emperor. And so I'm going to give you a list of Roman emperors right here. Let's count them. You've got, well, of course, the first one, and he posthumously was recognized as an emperor, was Julius Caesar, right? Y'all remember the story about Caesar? Did y'all study Caesar very much in history back when y'all were in school?
I'm sold. I don't remember when I was back in school.
I don't remember he got assassinated at the Forum or assassinated in the Senate.
Yeah,
That
he was.
had something to do with William
Yep.
Shakespeare.
Yep. Well, he after he was killed, he was posthumously recognized as an emperor by his son. And so I'm still here. I'm trying to get a good list of the Roman emperors for y'all because I want us to count them. You'll kind of be amazed by this. And my internet, of course, is wanting to act. Okay, so Augustus, when he got power,
Okay.
he backwards says that Julius Caesar was the first emperor. But you know, we're dealing with interpretation here. So Julius, Augustus, Tiberius. Then you've got Caligula. You've got Claudius. Then Nero. So Nero's number 6. Nero was in the 60s. He's the one who killed Paul and Peter. Now you've got the year of 4 emperors. The year of 4 emperors. Galba, Otho, Vitellius. They were all generals. That's how many? 9?
Yeah.
Who's the next one? Vespasian. Vespasian is the emperor when Jerusalem is destroyed in 69 AD by Titus, who becomes the next emperor.
That's 11.
Yeah, Titus is 11, but Vespasian was the emperor when this war starts and Jerusalem is destroyed. He is the emperor from 69 AD to 79 AD. Vespasian is the 10th Roman emperor. Now look at Daniel. Let's get back here. I considered the horns. There came among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked by the roots. Now, we're dealing with interpretation of prophecy. It's hard to know exactly what we're talking about here. But if there was a year of 4 emperors, because 3 of them got killed by Vespasian, and he's the 10th, and they're like, eh? It's interesting. It had 10 horns, and 3 were by the last one, or by the little one. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Now that speaking great things is probably not written as a positive. It probably means making boasts or claims. And what happens as this great mouth speaks out of this horn, in verse 9, as I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Now this imagery is phenomenally worshipful imagery. You know who he's talking about here. The Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. It's just this amazing imagery of the Ancient of Days holding court. I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed, and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed.
That sounds like Revelation.
That sounds a lot like Revelation. It also sounds like Jesus' description of himself. What will happen if you see the Son of Man coming on the clouds? This imagery also where the disciples just asked Jesus, is this the time you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? There's this idea of the authority and kingdom that belongs to Jesus when he's here on his earthly ministry, and they're getting that from Daniel. So something about this fourth beast, the Ancient of Days, and the Son of Man. What's it talking about?
It's got to be Jesus. Return. Jesus' return.
Do y'all remember from chapter 2? Somebody read to me verses 44 through 45.
Yeah, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, silver, and gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy.
So this is another view, it looks like, of that rock tumbling down and smashing the statue. It happened in the time of the fourth kingdom in chapter 2. And what kingdom does it happen during in chapter 7?
Mm-hmm.
The fourth kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go over your study sheet real quick here and fill in some blanks. And what I'm going to have y'all do for homework is read the 4 passages at the bottom. We're going to come back and start next week on exactly this point of verses 9 to 14, because I want us to get involved with Revelation more, how it ties into that. I want us to look at these other prophets. I'm going to, like Zechariah, and we'll talk more about this because I don't want to fast forward through it, but I think it's important to get what Revelation, what Daniel, what Zechariah, what they're all talking about here. But okay, so question 1: Daniel has a vision during the reign of King. Who was this?
Belshazzar.
Belshazzar?
Yeah, this was Belshazzar. In this vision, he sees 4,
Winds of heaven.
and then 4 beasts.
Oh, 4 beasts. Oh, you got wind.
Now, I asked you this already, and I think we kind of came up with some good interpretations, but the first beast,
Nebuchadnezzar.
Babylon,
Babylon, and the second
Mhm.
beast,
Medo-Persia,
Oh.
third beast,
Alex the Great,
Alexander the Great.
yeah, and the fourth beast,
Rome.
yeah, Rome.
Yeah, Rome.
Daniel then sees a vision of a throne with the blank of days sitting
ancient.
upon it. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Ancient of Days.
Uh-huh.
Number 5, then one like a son of blank
Man.
comes.
Man.
Yes, Son of Man comes and receives a kingdom from the one on the throne. So we know the 4 beasts are 4.
Kings.
Empire?
Now here's
Kingdom.
Yep.
Kingdom.
kingdom, yeah. And now
And kingdoms.
this is going to be an interesting answer, but who shall eventually possess the kingdom forever? And we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, because Who will possess the kingdom forever?
Well, Rebecca wrote down Jesus.
Jesus, but you know, in the all term, we will.
Yeah, because look at verse 27. Look at verse 27.
We just
And the
ended.
kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High.
People of the saint.
Okay, so
Which,
people,
as you know, the New Testament teaches we are co-heirs with Christ through grace by faith, sons of God. Even you women are considered sons of God legally. It's not that God does not say, hey, I don't care about your gender, no. But legally speaking, you inherit just like a son, even if you're a daughter. And that means you're a co-heir, a co-regent. And we see that in the New Testament where we reign with him. And so that was already written down in Daniel chapter 7. As the Son of Man receives his kingdom, the saints of the Most High shall be given that kingdom. Well, this is a good stopping point. Like I said, what I want y'all to do this week is study the 4 passages at the bottom. Psalm 2, Zechariah 14, Mark 13, and Psalm 80. Look at those because obviously Zechariah writes very late. He writes after Daniel. Mark, written way after Daniel, the words of Jesus there. But Psalm 2 and Psalm 80 were before Daniel. Daniel was raised on Psalm 2 and Psalm 80. So you look at that and say, what would his interpretation of those Psalms have been based on these visions? So we'll talk about that at the beginning of next week, and then we're gonna go into the 4th beast. We're going to go back in Revelation where we were today and talk about that beast out of the sea with the, very similar imagery. We're going to talk about what's different, what's the same, and we'll talk about what's going on at the end of Daniel chapter 7. So next week, hopefully we finish up chapter 7. And then we get into chapter 8, which is a world into itself. So it'll be interesting. Any questions before we leave it for today? What I think if you read Psalm 2 and Psalm 80, just read it and think to yourself, Daniel knew these scriptures. They were psalms that had been written for hundreds of years, and they were the hymn book of Israel and Judah. And when Daniel sees this vision, he's going to be thinking of Psalm 2 and Psalm 80. And he'll be thinking of some passages in Isaiah. We'll be thinking of some other passages in the prophets, but especially in the Psalms. Anything else?
No, it was great.
Good.
I appreciate y'all. This passage is so worshipful when we think about this vision of God on a throne. I mean, you get the idea of his throne was fiery flames, and you just are in awe of him. This idea that, Daniel had a vision of God and lived to speak about it. That in and of itself is pretty amazing because, wow, I will give you one verse in closing that this is out of Micah chapter 5, verse 2. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah,
Oh, yeah.
who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel,
Well known.
whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Similar language, not the same title, but do you see how kingship and ancient days are tied together in that passage in Micah? So I don't think Daniel is getting new information here. I think what God is showing him is something he had always showed the prophets, and he showed David in the Psalms. It's something ancient that he's showing him. So we'll get to that next week. I can't wait for it. I hope you all have a great evening.
All right.
Thank you, buddy.